Now turning to the glass, I'm going to begin with some images of Dorflinger's early glass production in the Brooklyn factory. And this open comport produced in about 1858 is a very early example of the glassware produced by the company in Brooklyn. The designs are relatively simple. You see a simple solid stem on the comport and a large foot. Now, if you look at the design on the large foot, you'll see a large star and you'll see individual fans between the rays of the star. An early Dorflinger collector named Helen Barger nicknamed this the Brooklyn Star. It is very characteristic of glassware made in Brooklyn, not just by Dorflinger, but by some of his competitors as well during the Brooklyn years in the 1850s and 1860s. Here's a celery vase. Again, this is a Dorflinger family piece, an early example from about 1858 to 1860 as well, in simple heavy flute design and also with engraved grape leaves engraved on the individual flute panels, and again with the Brooklyn Star foot. This is a covered comport, so you have a lid on the comport. The purpose of the lids was to keep insects out of your compote, which was a stewed fruit dessert mixture. Before window screens, these lids were very handy to protect your dessert. Dorflinger produced the state table service for the Lincoln White House in Brooklyn in 1861. And here are two wonderful examples from the Lincoln State Service. On the left, you have the factory sample wine glass, and on the right, the factory sample champagne glass. This design was really innovative at the time. You have fine diamond cutting around the bottom of the bowls, a row of ovals cut directly above the fine diamonds, and then a beautiful ivy engraved border around the top, and then the U.S. coat of arms engraved with the eagle and the shield and the banner with the words E Pluribus Unum. This was a very popular table service in the White House. It remained the state table service for 30 years, from 1861 until 1891. This is another wonderful early example of glassware produced by Dorflinger in the late years in Brooklyn, around 1860 to say 1868, possibly even early white mills. And it's in a beautiful classic form and shape, and the engraved fish on the body of the pitcher or the ewer are very unusual. These two bottles were produced early in white mills from about 1868 until about 1870. The stoppers, the paperweight stoppers, were produced by two brothers, Nicholas and Francois Lutz. They were in that first group of glassblowers that Christian Dorflinger brought here in 1868 to help get the 67 and 68 to help get the factory started. They would actually make these individual glass petals, flower petals, leaves and stems out of glass at home in a home workshop, bring the individual pieces into the factory, and then mold the clear glass around them to make stoppers or to make paperweights. We love to find white mills, stoppers, and paperweights produced by the Lutz brothers because they were only here for 3 years, from 1867 until 1870, when they moved to Cape Cod and went to work for the Boston and Sandwich Glass Company. These early decanters show Dorflinger's French heritage in their shape and excellent fine detail in the engraving with the little dots like snowflakes and the bands of flowers, the garlands of flowers around the top. The stoppers have engraved garlands on them as well, and then with the monogram. Wonderful examples of Dorflinger's early work in White Mills, probably in the late 1860s to early 1870s. In 1874, President and Mrs. Grant ordered a set of glassware from the Dorflinger Glass Company for their daughter Nellie's wedding in the White House, which was the social event of the year. Dorflinger ordered this set of glassware for his personal use, paid for it himself, and the glassware was decorated with his initials. And here you see a cordial on the left and a champagne glass on the right with the initials USG engraved on the upper rim. Another example from the set in the collection of the Dorflinger Factory Museum is this large tankard jug, again with Grant's initials USG on the upper rim. This service was reordered in 1876 by the Grants and again in 1880. And some of the later order did not have the Grant initials engraved on the pieces. These pieces are all cut in a design that Dorflinger exhibited at the Philadelphia exhibition in 1876. And what you can see now is that the designs or the patterns are becoming more complex, more intricate, and more involved. And the Philadelphia exhibition allowed the American glass companies to show a large portion of the American public for the first time the quality of the glassware that they could produce. And as a result, you saw a rapid increase in demand for glassware being produced by the American companies following the Philadelphia exhibition. During the 6 months that the Philadelphia exhibition was open, 10 million Americans visited the Philadelphia exhibition. And although some were repeats, that 10 million represented about 20% of the total American population at the time. So this was a pivotal event in the history of the American cut glass industry, and it really led to the most successful years of operation for not only the Dorflinger Companies, but for the Dorflinger Companies' competitors as well. There is a very, very famous set in the Philadelphia Museum of Art that Dorflinger exhibited at the Philadelphia exhibition and then gave to the city of Philadelphia, cut in this design. And that set is really a remarkable example of Dorflinger's work. Here is a chalice also done in that same centennial design with these different blocks of silver diamond, fine diamond, and sharp diamond cutting to create the overall design. This comport is a 25th wedding anniversary gift. We don't know who the comport was made for, but you can also begin to see how at about this time, how elaborate the designs were becoming. So this comport was made in 1879. You can see again how intricate the cutting is on the foot, how intricate the cutting is on the bowl, more cutting and decoration on the stem of the comport as well, and also cutting on those pillars going around the body of the bowl as well. And here's a close-up of the engraving. The Latin phrase translates to "an unbroken chain unites us," and you see the word congratulations, 1854 to 1879, which is how we knew that this was a wedding anniversary gift. You have the two H initials, but unfortunately we do not know who this comport was made for. This set, also probably in the 1870s, shows Dorflinger's work in color. Dorflinger produced a substantial amount of work in color. Most glass was produced in colorless glass. Color was more difficult to make, more expensive to purchase, but it really made the designs stand out. And here's a wonderful example of a small decanter, wine glasses, and goblets in a design that Dorflinger also exhibited in colorless glass at the Philadelphia exhibition in 1876. And here's a close-up view of the water goblet, you can see that Christian Dorflinger still goes back and uses from time to time the Brooklyn Star design that was very popular back in the 1850s and 1860s. This set of glassware is done in Dorflinger's Parisian pattern. That's the pattern that the Dorflinger Factory Museum uses in its dining room display. This, like many of Dorflinger's early designs, was developed by a man named John O'Connor, who ran the cutting department at the Dorflinger factory from 1867 until 1890. So the Parisian pattern is a wonderful early Dorflinger example. O'Connor also designed this design or pattern called Sultana. And you can see it's an expanding star pattern that begins in the very center of the piece and then grows and expands out as you move outward from that center point. Again, another wonderful early Dorflinger design. In 1891, President Benjamin Harrison ordered a new state service for the White House, and here again you have the factory sample wine glass on the left and the factory sample champagne glass on the right. This design was made in the Russian pattern. It was a very popular pattern in the 1880s and 1890s, and that's the pattern that Dorflinger sent to Mrs. Harrison after an initial design that was rejected and that Mrs. Harrison accepted. And you can also see the presidential coat of arms engraved on the shield on each piece. This coat of arms is very much like the presidential coat of arms that we use today. This bowl is what we call a progression bowl, and it shows the 4 stages of the cutting process. To the upper left, you have the glass blank, the blown glass, marked with a red lead crayon to guide the first cutter as he begins to cut the pattern or design onto the piece. The upper right-hand panel shows the first stage of the cutting process, what we call roughing, which is cutting the rough outline of the design. The lower right-hand panel is smoothing. That's smoothing out all the rough edges, filling in all of the fine detail in the design. And the lower left-hand panel is polishing. Dorflinger made these progression bowls for the owners of jewelry stores who were selling the glass so that they could explain the different stages of the process. What they were really doing is saying, look at how much work went into making these pieces of glass, and that's why I have to charge you as much as I do for these examples. We love at the Factory Museum having this progression bowl example because it is identical to an example given by the Dorflinger Companies to the Philadelphia Museum of Art in 1903 to commemorate Christian Dorflinger's 75th birthday. This loving cup, these were often done as presentation pieces at weddings, is another wonderful example of Dorflinger's work in color. You have an outer layer of green glass cased over an inner layer of colorless glass, and then the cutter cuts through the outer color layer to expose the clear glass underneath, and you can see how it really makes the design stand out. Silver decoration or ornamentation, what we call silver mounts, became very popular in the late 1800s, and this is an example where you have a silver rim added to the cut glass loving cup. This is a cigar jar or humidor. It has a hollow lid on the top. You would put a moist sponge in the lid, and that would keep your cigars properly humidified. This is cut in Dorflinger's Marlborough pattern, a wonderful example again of Dorflinger's color work with a ruby layer of glassware on the outside and cut through to expose the clear glass on the inside. These two wine bottles are cut in Dorflinger's Arcola pattern, a very intricate and elaborate pattern. You can see, because of the intricate nature of the design, how much of the color has actually been cut away in those large middle panels on the design. Here are three wonderful examples of Dorflinger's color work in stemware. On the left, you have an example in the Hob Diamond pattern. Again, the pattern chosen by the Grants for their daughter's wedding. In the center, you have a wonderful example in cobalt blue. This is an unnamed Dorflinger pattern that appeared on an example in Kay Manchie's articles in 1972 on Dorflinger glass in the magazine Antiques. And then the glass on the right is cut in Dorflinger's Montrose pattern in a very unusual poppy color. This vase is in a classic Dorflinger shape, and it's cut in Dorflinger's rich cut pattern, one of the more elaborate designs that Christian Dorflinger produced. And this two-piece punch bowl set is cut in Dorflinger's Annona pattern, another very intricate design. This is a wonderful example of just what the Victorians prized in the glass produced during the Brilliant period. Virtually every surface area of the piece is cut or decorated in some way, and the high lead content in this glass causes all of those cuts to act like tiny prisms, and you can see flashes of the color spectrum as natural and artificial light move through the piece. Again, what the Victorians were really prizing and valuing in this cut glass during the Brilliant period. This is a champagne jug cut in Dorflinger's pattern number 99. Again, red cut to clear with a silver spout on the top. A number of different silver companies produce silver for Dorflinger. One company, Scheibler and Company in Brooklyn, produced silver marked with Dorflinger's name. So above that decorative rim on the back of the spout above the handle, you will find the words Dorflinger Sterling. But other silver companies would make silver for these pieces as well. This is a bowling pin shaped vase in Dorflinger's Montrose pattern. It really shows this design off to great effect with these circles that really act almost like tiny lenses, and then you can look through the lenses to see the basket weave design on the other side. This image shows a bride starter set. So if you went into Dorflinger's retail store in New York City and you said, I'm looking for a wedding gift, this is what they would show you. What makes this so unusual is the box. It is literally the only original box with its original satin lining and its silk ribbon that we have seen. So it is a wonderful way for the museum to show its visitors how Dorflinger would package and market and sell its glassware. This flower center would sit in the center of your dining table with a large flower arrangement, and this large flower center weighs about 18 pounds. It's about 18 inches in diameter, and it's cut in Dorflinger's Ramona design. Here is another oil lamp. This one has an unusual tulip-shaped shade. If you wanted the tulip-shaped shade, it cost an extra $10. Also, the oil font for the kerosene is in glass and has a cut glass top as well. Just a wonderful example of Dorflinger's work in producing oil lamps. This cut glass baseball bat is a one-of-a-kind item. It is one of the most popular items in the museum's collection. This cut glass baseball bat was produced in 1930 for a local baseball hero, a man named Eddie Murphy. He played originally on the White Mills team in 1906 and 1907, and then he went on to play for Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. In 1913, when the Athletics played the New York Giants in the World Series, Eddie's friends back in White Mills made this full-size cut glass baseball bat and presented it to him at the start of the second game of the series, and the Athletics won the series in 5 games. It's a marvelous example of Dorflinger glass, and it's also a wonderful example of local history in the White Mills area. Beginning in about 1896, an Englishman named Walter Graham was hired to introduce stone wheel engraving at the Dorflinger factory. And he began to use smaller stone wheels on a lathe to produce this lighter, more decorative floral design for the glassware. And in 1899, Walter Graham produced a set of glassware for the wedding of William K. Vanderbilt Jr. and Virginia Graham Fair in New York. And the wine ewer here is an example from the Vanderbilt set. Dorflinger produced the glassware. A couple of New York silversmiths produced the silver. You can see how over the top designs were getting at the turn of the century, particularly among the wealthy Victorians. This is the kind of thing that they really would have valued and prized and enjoyed. Here is another example, a flower vase in the form of a loving cup from the Vanderbilt service, and then finally a water pitcher from the Vanderbilt service as well. So just imagine at the wedding breakfast, the table set with all of this glass and silver in colorless glass and in the green, and also in a cranberry color as well. This is another wonderful example of Walter Graham's work. You see the stone engraving, the flower designs in the center and the lower, upper lower part of the vase and around the top rim, and then you see more traditional cutting around the bottom. This vase is identical to another example that the Dorflinger Companies gave to the Philadelphia Museum of Art in 1903 to commemorate Christian Dorflinger's 75th birthday. There were another example of a hybrid design where you see stone wheel engraving in the center panel in Dorflinger's Rococo design, and then with more traditional cut designs on the top and on the center and the bottom of the vase. So these were also popular around the turn of the century and early into the 1900s. Here is another example where you combine simple cutting with the strawberry diamond pattern on the upper portion and the lower portion, and then with stone engraving with the floral design around the center band. What makes this piece so unusual is that hammered finish on that center band. The only way you get that is a cutter had to cut each of those individual little dimples to create that background texture before the floral design was cut through to the clear glass underneath. And this picture, another example in a cranberry over clear glass cut in another stone wheel engraved floral design. This example also has Dorflinger sterling in the rim. And these two vases, the one on the right in another unusual poppy color, the one on the left in green, are good examples of stone wheel engraving, lighter and more delicate than the heavy, elaborate cut glass that was so popular in the latter part of the 19th century. And here are two later examples of stone wheel engraving with the flower designs, and then with the color applied to the tops of the vases and then allowed to kind of drip, drown, or bleed down from the top onto the body of the pieces. So these would have been a little bit later in the early 1900s. Dorflinger produced glass for yachts. Here are a couple of good examples. These were made for the yacht Annona. And you can see nautical themes and designs in these pieces. The cutting around the tops of the pieces are cut to imitate a rope. You also have the flags, the pennants, the burgees for the yacht club and also for the individual yacht, and often, as in this case, a banner with the name of the yacht as well. To the right, you see an actual Dorflinger advertisement where Dorflinger highlighted that they gave special attention to the fitting out of yachts. So if you had a yacht, of course you wanted Dorflinger glass for your yacht. The last large special order produced by the company in 1918 was for the Presidential Palace in Cuba. Tiffany Studios had the contract to decorate the Presidential Palace. They did the metal work, but they hired Dorflinger to produce the table service. There were 2,300 pieces in this set, each piece with this intricate coat of arms of Cuba engraved on the piece. It would take an engraver about 7 hours to do each one of these coats of arms. So a team of 22 engravers worked solid for 4 months to produce the engraving on these pieces. And we learned a few years ago that the set still exists in Cuba under the care of the Havana city historian. This, like many of the other examples you see in the Dorflinger Factory Museum, is a factory sample, which we are delighted to have because they're usually in excellent condition and they give us the ability to show you pieces that were made by the Dorflinger Companies. This is another example with the Cuban coat of arms. This was one of the alternative designs that Dorflinger proposed. The previous design was the one that was selected. And wherever we can in the museum, we like to show pieces that show the glassmaking process. So on the left here, you have the glass blank for the Cuban set, with the design marked in red lead crayon, and then the finished piece on the right. So you can see how the space for the shield and the engraving was blocked out, and then how the design for the simple cutting around the bottom of the tumbler was marked out as well. This wine glass was part of a set produced by Dorflinger that was never actually put into production. The work on this is really intricate and amazing. It is done with copper wheel engraving and then polished to create what was called rock crystal, an imitation of rock crystal ware produced in Asia. It's a wonderful example of the engraver's art. This set proved to be so expensive to produce that it was never put into production, and the only pieces that we have are factory samples. This is one example, and here is a detail of the engraving work done on these pieces. And the Factory Museum has 4 examples from this set. In 1900, Christian Dorflinger established a subsidiary called the Honesdale Decorating Company, and he hired an Austrian, a man named Karl Prosch, to produce and decorate the glassware. So Dorflinger would actually produce the glass, and then Prosch would do the decorating work, adding the gold designs. These pieces use hydrofluoric acid to cut back the design through the color layers to expose the layers underneath. And you definitely see the Art Nouveau influence in the design of these pieces. And then after the acid cutback work was done, the gold decoration was added at the Honesdale Decorating Company. And you can see several examples of vases in this image, and also a very rare small oil lamp done in the cameo designs. Here are 3 examples with the oil lamp, a tall vase in cobalt blue, and then a small vase in three layers. So colorless glass on the inside, then a yellow glass layer, and then with the amber glass layer on top. And here you can actually see how the acid cuts those sharp edges as you cut through the amber layer and then the yellow layer to expose the clear glass underneath. And in these pieces, to give added effect to the design, acid was used to give the glass a frosted appearance so that you really get the three-dimensional effects of the design. And here's a closer up image of the tall vase done in cobalt blue. This small vase was made for Charles Northwood as a gift to his wife. Charles Northwood ran the acid etching department at the Dorflinger factory. And he developed a line of acid etched glassware in 1907, and production began in 1909. But this is another really wonderful example of acid cutback work in a unique one-of-a-kind piece. Unlike the other pieces that we just saw, here you have different bands of colored glass going around the piece. So it's only two layers thick, but you have a band of orange and a band of amethyst and a band of green going around the piece. And then the design is cut through them. So you get the effect of what we call rainbow glass with these different panels of color on the piece. And this little vase is only about 6 inches high, but it's a really wonderful, intricate example of this cameo glassware work being done in America in the early 1900s. Now, Northwood developed the Kalana art glass line. The word Kalana is Hawaiian for heavenly. And so this line of glassware created about 34 different floral designs. So when Dorflinger promoted and advertised this line as his Kalana art glass, what he was really selling was his heavenly flowers. And this is a trade sign made for jewelry store owners when they were selling and displaying the glassware from this line. Hydrofluoric acid was used to create the design on the surface of the glass, and here you see women doing the design work. The plain glass was covered with a thin wax coating, and then these women would use copper templates, and they would use a stylus, you can see that in their hands, and they would follow the design of the flower on the copper template and cut down through the wax layer. So when the glass was dipped into hydrofluoric acid, everywhere where the glass was exposed, the acid would etch the design onto the glassware. To create the full effect of the flower design, you would go back, shave away some more of the wax, and then dip again, or just expose the glassware to acid fumes to give a detailed three-dimensional view of the floral design. This was the showroom in White Mills for the Kalana glassware. We believe this was set up in what is now the entrance to the Dorflinger Factory Museum. The black backdrop would help show the details of the Kalana designs. Here is the geranium design, acid etched onto a hollow stem champagne glass. The stem is hollow literally all the way down to the foot. It's one of the most fragile and delicate pieces of Dorflinger glass, and a good example of the Kalana line. Here is another example. This design is called Rose Line, and this design was produced in two ways. Here you see the design with the flowers and with a clear background, and here you see the design with the flowers but with a frosted background. So this design was produced both ways. One of the more elaborate designs was called Rose Band and Ribbon. Here you see that design on the Dr. Johnson Punch Bowl set. This design, because of its intricacy, would have taken several dippings to get all of the design onto the piece. Here is a design in this vase in sunflower. Some of these pieces are cut as well, but here the cutting is really secondary to the acid etching work. Here you have a large sunflower on this corset vase, and then with simple cutting around the top of the vase. The same is true for this vase in the wild rose design, where you have cutting on the base and also cutting around the top part of the vase, but most of the decoration is the acid etched rose design. This piece has cut glass panels, and then with fine diamond cutting around the top, and then after the cutting was completed, the poppy acid etch design was added onto those cut panels. And this is a very effective combination of cutting and also the acid etch design. And another really wonderful example, I think one of the best examples of the Kalana work done by the Dorflinger Companies, is this small bowl where again you have these elaborately cut panels with the poppy design etched onto those panels, and then with the hammered finish around the top rim of the piece and the bottom. Some pieces were done with a combination of acid etching and also with stone engraving. So this small little comport is a good example, or stand, where you have the crocus flowers acid etched and the stems and the leaves stone engraved. And another example called snowberry, where the snowberries and the band are done with acid etching, but the leaves and the stems and the little additional sprigs at the top were done with stone engraving. Some of the Kalana pieces were done in color. This was an experimental prototype where the design would be acid etched, and then the piece would be hand colored to accent the etching work. And this example of a vase is very effective in the use of color. What became the production pieces from this work were called the Florida line. Here is another example where you see the acid etching work and then the hand coloring of the pansy on the piece, and then some of the border as well. The border is what makes this another experimental example. Now in 1914, the company began to experience a difficulty in producing the lead crystal because of World War I. Remember, one of the key ingredients to make the fine lead crystal was potash, and Dorflinger got his potash from Germany. And the war years interrupted the supply of potash. Dorflinger had some materials. He also, we now understand, developed glass formulas to work around the absence of potash, but that still limited supplies. And so the company began to ask, what could we produce without the potash, something with a little lower quality glass. And beginning in 1917, the company produced a line of glassware called Reproductions Venetian. The name came from the fact that the company copied the designs and the shapes of early Venetian glassware from the 18th and 19th centuries. And the pieces were produced in solid pastel colors, in amber, and in turquoise and in amethyst, which allowed for the use of a little lower quality glass. This is a catalog page, a salesman's catalog page, showing different vessels in the Reproductions Venetian line. On the right-hand side, you see a bell beaker done in turquoise, and here in the museum's collection is the same bell beaker in amethyst. What makes these pieces so interesting are the little glass lion heads applied to the outside of the beaker. Here's a close-up of the little lion's heads. Frederick Carter at Steuben up in Corning was doing very similar work with lion's heads as well at about the same time. So this line of glassware is often mistaken for Carter Steuben, but these were actually Dorflinger pieces, as we could see from the trade catalog. Here's another catalog page. On the upper left, you have a small comport, a low comport, and then on the upper right-hand side, you have small comports as well. And on the next image, you can see one of those low comports, really a nut dish, and then the smaller individual nut dishes as well. These pieces, again, from the reproductions Venetian line, look very modern, really look like they could have been produced today. On the lower left, you see a really interesting design for a comport, a large comport, which has little glass rings hanging off of the bowl, and glass inserts on the stem, clear glass inserts on the stem. These are among some of the more interesting and attractive, I think, of the reproduction Venetian pieces. Here is that comport in amethyst, and here is the comport in turquoise. Now, those little glass rings and the handles for those rings are extremely delicate, and so you just don't find very many of these because so many of them were likely broken. Here is another catalog page. The center left vase on the lower side is a nice classic Dorflinger shape, and here is the same vase in amethyst. What makes this vase so unusual is that it is also stone engraved. There are very few examples from the reproduction Venetian line that are actually stone engraved as well. This example is in the Dorflinger Factory Museum collection. There are two other examples in the collection of the Everhart Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Candlesticks are shown on this page, and the candlestick in the center on the bottom really displays a classic Murano glass shape and form, and the one to its immediate right really has almost an arts and crafts look to it. And here are a pair of candlesticks in the former design, and then here are three candlesticks in the latter design. Stemware came in three different shapes. The top row shows the Venetian shape with this cone-like form. In the center, you have the Florentine shape, again, very much like you would see in Murano glass. And then the bottom shape, a more traditional shape as well. Here are examples in the first shape, and where you can see the cone-shaped pieces. And then here are examples from the Florentine shape. In 1917 or 1916, the company developed a formula for producing glassware with an opalescent texture to it. This is the actual glass house produced for Charles Henry Dorflinger, Christian Dorflinger's youngest son, who was then the manager of the factory's operations. And this is the glasshouse proof for that opal line developed in 1916. This line of glassware was only produced for 3 years, from 1917 until the factory closed in 1921. And here's another example of a proof for one of the colors for the opalescent glassware line. Here's the catalog page that shows stemware at the top and a bud vase in the center at the bottom. Here are examples of the stemware. This glassware came in 4 colors. It came in a lilac, a light green, a rose, and an amber. And you see the light green, the rose, and the amber here shown on the stemware. You can clearly see that opalescent texture in the stems of the glassware. Here's the bud vase. This is in the Ray Laternis collection. And On the upper right and the lower right, you see two variations of small comports in the opal glass line. And here are examples in all four of the colors for the small round comports. And here is an example that shows the ruffled top for the other style for these small comports. Again, Frederick Carter was doing very similar work at Steuben in Corning at about the same time, so many of these pieces are often mistaken for Carter Steuben glass, but as we've seen from the catalog pages, the shapes and the designs, these pieces were produced by the Dorflinger Companies, and they're a good example of how the company, right up until the end, was trying to develop innovative and new designs of art glass to try to appeal to changing tastes within the industry. And that concludes our presentation. Just a few facts about the Dorflinger Factory Museum. We're located in White Mills, Pennsylvania, about 2.5 hours from New York and Corning and Philadelphia. So we're pretty centrally located. The museum is open from mid-April through mid-December. And our hours of operation are 10 to 5 Wednesday through Saturday and 1 to 5 on Sunday. And we always are eager to welcome group tours to the museum with prior arrangements. Thank you very much.